There's so much volatility in the TCU wide receiver room. They could be really good in 2026 or very disappointing. But I think the three freshmen, now sophomores in that room should have you leaning to the former. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? I am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, host of your favorite one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday, but you know it better as the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get in on all of the football action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. Today's episode wraps up with a little bit of conflict. I don't know how to feel about Teon Parks, the latest pickup out of the transfer portal for TCU at cornerback. Segment 2 is about TCU had to remind people there's levels to this, and women's basketball made that very clear versus Arizona State this weekend. But one thing that is far from clear is the murkiness of the TCU wide receiver room going into 2026. There's question marks from the top all the way down to the bottom. I think it is the most high potential, low floor room that you'll see on this TCU roster. It is extremely volatile, but three freshmen that are now going to be sophomores are the reasons you should believe in this room. Of course, you have Jordan Dwyer, and I think Jordan Dwyer is a fantastic player. One thing I don't know about Dwyer is he a number one wide receiver? Because going off for 100 yards when you have Eric McAllister as the focal point for the defense is a lot different. And some people don't even get acclimated right away. Sometimes it takes you a year of having that responsibility on your shoulder before you know how to be a number one wide receiver. Unfortunately for Dwyer, he doesn't have that opportunity. And when looking at the 2026 season, what could have happened 2 years down the line doesn't matter anyway. That's the question mark at the top. Is the top guy going to be a top guy? But what I will say is as you look through the depth of that room, it's so much unproven commodities that it's hard to put a lot of stake in what they'll be in 2026. But I got three young players, Ed Small, right? You had Ed Small, Dozie Ezukanma, and then you also have Terry Shelton. Three young players who I think should play big parts in this wide receiver room. Of course, you got Jeremy Scott out of the transfer portal, but I think he falls in a question mark too, coming up from South Alabama. How are you going to perform on the P4 level? We have those question marks. So it's questions all the way down. I can't wait to explore this room. Dozie, Ed, Terry, those are three young players who, if they become the second leading receiver on this team, if somehow they become the leading receiver on this team, I wouldn't be surprised. That latter goes more so for Ed Small because of the three, he's the one with tangible proof. Each one of those three young players have a different reason to buy in. And at this point, it's just about buying. We haven't got to spring ball. We haven't gotten into seeing them in pads, seeing how they lay out in Gordon Samus's offense. For all I know, Jordan Dwyer and the things I'm saying about him could not even be what Samus wants in his top receiver. He may want a Dozie type of guy, right? Like that might be his type of player. He may look at Jeremy Scott, who's extremely explosive, and say, we're going to focus on big plays through the air. So it's going to be a lot of focus on what he can do. There's a lot of different ways that you could look at and go about the wide receiver room. But those three receivers that I just laid out, those three young freshmen turned sophomores that I'm laying out, those are the guys who are going to be your foundation for 2026, 2027, 2028. If you're able to keep them around, they have the ability to have an extremely deep wide receiver room in Fort Worth. Because Ed Small, he had that Abilene Christian game where, yes, you can write it off because it was Abilene Christian if you want to. I think that would be foolish, though. Because it wasn't just that he had 2 touchdowns in that game. It was about the fact that he had phenomenal catches. was one of the better touchdown. One of his touchdown catches was one of the better ones all season long. And it wasn't because he was wide open. It wasn't like, oh, he just ran a route against a guy who he wouldn't be competing against that quality of corner on Big 12 Saturdays, right? Like, it wasn't that. It was the way he snagged the ball. It was the ball skills when the ball was in the air. Those are things that do translate. It's important to lay out translatable and transferable skill sets in things that aren't. And to me, what you're seeing him do in those games was transferable. When you see the last game he played, but it was due to injury, and the last game he played was against Kansas State, he had 101 yards in that game. The best game he had all year as far as yardage goes. The Abilene Christian game was his only 2 touchdowns of the year, but they were impressive. And you saw different times where he gets sprinkled into the offense. Ed Small showed you I can be a guy who, I'm going to be honest with you, I think would have been a player in 2025 that was important to watch. But injuries, things like that, it just didn't end up playing out that way. Ed Small being a guy who could have been Ed Small being a guy who could have had a role at least. I think that's a very floor-focused statement, right? Ceiling, impact player. Floor, he just would have had a role. I think he would have had a role in the offense in 25, and that's not something that you could have said about the other 2 players. You couldn't. As far as Dozie goes, Dozie stepped in a game where Eric McAllister didn't get to play, right? Like, he barely played that Arizona State game. And when he barely played, they turned to Dozie. And Dozie got the stamps. So while Ed Small has the production, he has the yards, right? He has the moments that stand out to you. Dozie flew under the radar. He didn't play much. He didn't play much in this season. But when he did get out there and play, this is what Coach Dykes had to say about him. He said, I was really pleased with what Dozie did. He didn't get a ton of opportunities, but I thought he performed well. Malcolm Kelly gave him a stamp. These are things that, to me, play a large part. There's probably 3 there's 3 coaches who tend to matter the most for a player. And this is not some grand thought or whatever, right? Your head coach, your coordinator, and your position coach. If you can get 2 of those 3 to speak up on your behalf, I think you're probably going to go a long way. It helps if it's the coordinator and the head coach. But if your position coach is speaking up for you, that's great. Your head coach is speaking up for you, that's even better. Now, the offensive coordinator is new. Samus, I don't know what he thinks about Dozie. I don't know what he thinks about any of these guys, but I don't know what he thinks about Dozie. So because I don't know that, I can't say that he doesn't have a fan in Samus. I can't say that Samus doesn't have a role for him. I can't say that Samus does. I can't say positive or negative on how this will go. But what I can say is the 2 people, as far as coaches that matter, that were here in 2025, spoke extremely highly of Dozie. And that should be enough to have you optimistic. Once again, this is all about how much you believe. This is not me telling you that these guys are going to be all-stars. This is me saying that if they have to be your 3rd, 4th, 5th receivers, you can be extremely talented. This is me taking it a step forward and saying they might not have to settle in as your 3, 4, 5. One of these guys could rise up and be your second option, whether that's on a 1-game basis, whether that's multiple games. I look at Joseph Manjack as a guy from last year who had the ability to be the second best receiver on your team any given week. He did. It didn't always have to be McAllister then Dwyer. It didn't always have to be Dwyer then McAllister, right? It was more often McAllister than Dwyer, but sometimes it was McAllister, Manjack. Just depends on what the game was, you know? And you want players like that. If you have a number 3 wide receiver who can never be your second best guy, you're going to be capped off because on certain days, your number 2 just ain't going to have it. I like my players to always be able to take one step up, specifically in the wide receiver room where it's the hierarchy is a little bit more visible. But I like my players to be able to take one step up, perform one step up. So if the guy ahead of you is having a bad day, which happens, he's just having a rough outing, you can step in. That's the type of thing I want. So we've gone through 2 of the players. Terry Shelton, he's the flash guy. So while Dozie has the stamps, while he has like the reference letters and whatnot, I don't know much about him, but he does have some good references. Terry Shelton is the flashes guy, and we've seen that at the end of the season in the bowl game. He only had 1 catch before that, and that was against Abilene Christian. But against USC, he saw a little bit more time. And he resulted with a really good display of ball skills. I was going to say showing. I would say he had a display of ball skills and then also really good showing of body control. Like, I think that was pretty good for him. On one of the 22, I think it was a 22-yard catch that he had in the Alamo Bowl, in which he was running a streak right up the straight up the sidelines. The ball was, I'm not going to say underthrown. I think it was more of a back shoulder throw. So I think it was purposefully, excuse me. I think it was purposely placed there. He goes up, he grabs it, he locates the ball. I thought it was really good control, ball skill, all the things that go into that. So in general, those are your 3 wide receivers that are going to make up your depth. They're going to make up your depth. And I don't know that Scott is a for sure thing. I don't. So I wouldn't be shocked to see one of these guys be your second best receiver. My money would be on Ed Small because he came in immediately. They talked about his intelligence. That's going to help you in starting a new system. They talked about how quickly he picked things up. That comes from hard work mixed with the intelligence. That, once again, should help you in picking up a new system. It wouldn't shock me at all if we go into 2026 and we see Ed Small as the number 2 receiver for TCU. That shouldn't shock you at all either. So many question marks in this room. So much volatility. Is the number 1 guy a number 1 guy, or is he just going to be the best receiver in the room? That's not the same thing. Let's not get it confused. Every team has someone who is the best receiver in their room. Not every team has a number 1 wide receiver. Where will Jordan Dwyer fall is one of the most interesting questions to ask. And I'm going to ask it, and eventually we'll be able to answer it. Hopefully through spring ball, definitely once we get into the season. I'm very hopeful for it. I think that elevates the ceiling, right? Jordan Dwyer lifts the ceiling of this room. If he can become a number 1 wide receiver, then you're looking at a team that has a go-to guy in any situation. But those 3 freshmen I named, Small, Dozie, Shelton, right? If they all play up to their potential, if even 2 out of the 3 play up to their potential, that raises the floor. So we can focus on Dwyer because everybody wants to talk about the ceiling. We can talk about Dwyer because everybody wants to talk about the ceiling. Everybody wants to talk about the number 1, and that's important. That's probably going to be the biggest multiplier of your offensive game plan through the air. But those guys who are elevating your floor are equally as important. Not every game is your number 1 going to be on. Not every game can you just throw to 1 receiver. You just throwing to 1 receiver, you're going to get shut down eventually. But if you got Dozie to throw to, you got Terry to throw to, you got Ed to throw to, you got Scott to throw to. I know he's not part of this conversation, but he is a part of that conversation. Then you become a much more prolific passing attack. It's a high volatile room, but it's also a very high potential room. All right. High potential. Make sure you're checking it out. Cut the check. As we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs, we will be taking a look at the women's basketball team who made a statement against Arizona State, telling everybody, hey, don't forget, there is levels to this. True. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day. There's only one more left in the playoffs. Mind you, there's only one more game left in the playoffs. You have Indiana versus Miami. You have the U versus the team that nobody thought would ever be in a national championship. Good time to make a little bit of money. Good time to be a football fan. Good time for you to do both. So here's what I love about it is you get to use the profit boost on bets that you already feel good about. Ride with a favorite when you think the team controls the matchup. Get the boost from there. It's absolutely amazing, and it allows you to have even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly. So I love that. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. Visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Now, if you want even more access Get the Everydayer Club. I have great t-shirts, or we have great t-shirts. I have one of them. They just aren't on me right now. Green long sleeve. You got gray with a black logo long sleeve. You got the hoodies you can buy, right? Like you can even customize it to where you get specifically Locked On Horned Frogs merch. If you get that, take a picture, tag me at South Exclusive. Starts with an S, ends with an S. Y'all know the deal. But TCU women's basketball, they also know the deal. They also are very aware of where they stand, and that is near the top of the Big 12 as far as women's basketball standings go. I thought that this game against Arizona State was a good way to remind everybody that there are levels to this. Sometimes you must say, I understand what records say. Records lie. Please don't tell me that numbers don't lie. I'm not buying it. Numbers lie all the time. And I think that TCU was on a mission to prove this is one of the times in which it lied. I really don't believe that they were doing that purposefully, but I think that's what their matchup stated, right? Like I think the outcome of their game versus Arizona State on Sunday showed that there is levels, because Arizona State came into this game with a 16-1 record. TCU came into this game with a 15-1 record. That's very close. Very close. I would even say, 8 points. 8 points close. Definitely ain't 31 point close, right? Like that's a wide margin. That's a wide margin, and that's the margin by which TCU knocked them off. Now, I think TCU wanted us to show, we did just do this last year with Haley. Then we came back and got Olivia, and we're about to do it again. I do want you to know that we're a real contender. We've been doing this for more than just a year. Meanwhile, Arizona State, they're on the upsurge. Arizona State is in a situation in which they are a team that is trying to find their way. They are a team that is trying to be a player in the Big 12. And I think they can be. I think they have a talented squad. However, TCU is one of the best schools in the country. And they wanted to show that. Now, I do think the rankings exemplify a difference. But rankings don't mean anything. If we're going to be honest, rankings don't mean anything. Once you step on the court, it don't mean nothing. It means that you are the hunted. When you got numbers next to your name and your opponent doesn't, you are the hunted. When you have numbers next to your name, that means you have expectations. And I think TCU delivered on those expectations versus Arizona State with an absolutely dominant win, the most dominant win that they've had since coming into Big 12 play. 30-point wins used to be regular. That used to be what you could expect during the out-of-conference schedule. Now, you're not playing as quality of teams. You're playing some schools that are low-mid majors, right? Like, it is going to be more difficult once you get into your conference schedule. Hands down. Hands down. That is when it's going to ratchet up. But for you to come in and have a 31-point lead versus a team, or excuse me, a 31-point victory over a team that had only lost one game up to that point throughout the season, that speaks volumes to me. That shows that we're here to dominate yet again. We don't forget what happened versus Utah. They called it a punch in the mouth. And the way you respond is always important. And the way that TCU responded was not just with one game versus Oklahoma State. And I thought that was great. That was going to be a very difficult matchup. They've had your number over the last couple of years. You haven't really been able to knock them off, right? Only one time in the last 6 matchups. So that wasn't a game that was going to be a wide margin of a victory. But it is a game in which you were able to beat Oklahoma State by what they do. And you did the same thing versus Arizona State. So let's start off with this. I want to go in chronological order. Let's start off with this Oklahoma State game. Both of these teams came into this matchup last Wednesday being one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. TCU said, we're still one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country, but we're also one of the best three-point defenses in the country. And that needs to be remembered. Because whether it was closeouts, whether it was late in the shot clock, whether it was forcing them into bad looks, rushing looks, or just missing some open ones, all of which had happened to a team like Oklahoma State, they shot 4 of 22. That's 18.2% from the field. Significantly lower. I think that was half of what they typically average. Meanwhile, TCU came out and they shot 9 of 18. That's 50%. That's above what they normally do. All of these teams, or both of these teams, take a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. They're very efficient. They take a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. They're very efficient. You would think that the first two both being true would mean that the third is true as well, but we have seen multiple times that's not the case. So I do like to point out that these are three different adjectives to describe the three-point shooting of each team. TCU came in and they beat them at their own game. Granted, very similar game, but they went in and did what Oklahoma State does. In this one of the things that was noticeable is the physicality of the matchup. But at the same time, it's not as if Arizona State was bullying TCU. Instead, it was TCU who was doing the bullying. I love Silva. I think what she does is almost underrated because Olivia Miles is so special. Because Miles is so special, I think sometimes it's easy to kind of forget and lose track of what it is that other players on the team do. And Silva has been just a beast, especially these last couple games. She's been a beast. In this one, she had 10 points, right? She had 12 rebounds, so a double-double. You look at the team in general, they dominated the boards, which ironically for a physical team in Arizona State, they don't do a lot on the boards. Offensive, defense, that's not their cup of tea. But you saw a lot of physicality. But guess what? 42 points in the paint for TCU. Meanwhile, 16 points in the paint for Arizona State. The stretch is only going to get more difficult. I'm still looking forward to Martin Luther King Day, in which TCU will face Ohio State. As it stands right now, top 25 matchup. Time will go on. One's 13, one's 19. So two top 20 teams at that. Maybe we'll get a matchup between two top 15 teams. Maybe one of those teams will fall out of the top 25. Who knows, right? I think time will only tell. Time will only tell. But I'm interested in what this matchup can provide. I think it's a great game, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's still some games before that. But this is, to me, an absolute statement of dominance, an absolute statement of there's levels to this. You're here. I'm here. I know we both had one loss going into this game, but I want to show you crystal clear that is the only thing that we have in common, right? The amount of wins we have is the closest we'll ever be. 31 points. And I don't say that playfully. I don't say that jokingly. I think that Arizona State is a really good program. I think they're rising, but I think TCU is just in a higher place right now. They aren't rising necessarily. And if they are rising, they're rising from a different place, right? That ascension is different. And I think that sometimes showing we're still big sis in this case. I was going to say big bro, but we're still big sis in this case. I think that says something. You know, I think that says something to teams in the dominant fashion in which you win. If I see you again, that's going to be in the back of your mind. Let's move forward. Let's move forward as TCU, not the men's basketball team, or excuse me, not the women's basketball team, but the football team had a really concerning transfer portal signing. I wish I got a better recommendation, but I didn't. Let's get into it as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair, and I don't know what you guys are preparing for, but I do know that the new year is here, and for me, I'm always trying to find new ways to decorate. I got friends who are coming over next Saturday for a UFC event. And I'm thinking, do I want to add anything to my house now? Well, I'm going to be hosting people. That's going to be extremely interesting. And if I do, you already know I'm going to Wayfair. Give your home the refresh it needs. Maybe you're not planning for an event. Maybe you just want something new in 2026. That's cool. Pick up some bedding. Pick up some accent pillows, whatever it is. I see dressers on there if you want to change your dresser. I did at the end of the year. Wayfair. Shopping is easy. Delivery is smooth. And everything arrives exactly how I expected it to. Honestly, it made getting into the routine this new year much more manageable. So get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on the Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Teon Parks is a guy who I immediately hopped on the phone and said, all right, tell me something about this guy. Came from Colorado, done a crossover show with the Colorado host, wanted to see what he thought. Hey, what can you tell me about Teon Parks? And what I received left me extremely conflicted. I'll tell you why I was for this signing, and I'll tell you why I was against this signing. Why I was against the signing was purely the response I got from our host of Locked On Buffs. If you haven't checked them out, check them out. It's phenomenal. So unique. You got to, I think that's one of the shows that you really should watch, even if you're not a fan of them, because I think that Borba just does a great job. But he said he's a PI monster. Hit me with the little, the yikes. Yikes. I hope that if you type in yikes if you have an iPhone, if you type in yikes in your Google or in your emoji search, you'll get the one where he's like, with all the teeth showing. That's what he sent to me. And I was like, oh no, that's my first message. Oh no, we got a bump from Colorado. The Buffs are going to attack him. But the truth is that Teon Parks is an athlete, a talented athlete. And though he had a problem with being a pass interference machine, per our host, and I wish I knew when they happened, right? Like, I think the timing of them also matters. If you're getting a bunch of 4th down PIs, getting some 3rd down PIs, getting some 4th quarter PIs, right? Like critical moments. Because it's not like in college, you're going to be penalized at the spot of the foul. So I don't care if it's all the way down the field. I don't care if it's shallow. It doesn't matter. But when are you having? I wish I seen that. He only had 2 accepted. So I would like to know how many he had that weren't accepted, things like that. But in general, the host did not have me excited. One thing he did say that I thought was good is that Parks is an athlete and he's talented. He's an athletic player. So what I'll say is you can work with that. And the direct message to me was, hey, if you have a coordinator or a position coach who can develop, you'll like this guy. That just tells me he has all the potential. He just needs to do it. He played well at Illinois State, but then he went to Colorado and he didn't have the ball production I wanted, but he did show himself to be a quality and competent player, enough to say I'm going to stick on the Big 12 level. So I think that also speaks volumes. It's not the only cornerback that they brought in. Or the good is that he's an experienced starter. And I think TCU needs someone who is an experienced starter on the Big 12 level. It doesn't even have to be Big 12, Power 4 level. You're going to have a lot of question marks in that cornerback room. I like the fact that Teon Parks is a guy who at the worst, has starting experience in this conference. To me, that is something that TCU needed, because at the worst, once again, it'll be a steadying player. At worst. Last time I'm going to say the worst word. Just kidding. The other player that they brought in, and I actually like this one a little bit more, is Kalen Carroll. And Carroll is a player who's kind of the reverse of Parks, where Parks spent 2 years at Illinois State before transferring to Colorado and getting on the Big 12 level. You look at a guy like Carroll, who spent 3 years at Cincinnati, transferred to Central Michigan, and I thought he had a better year. He started as well, so he's also started here. Now you have 2 players who have started on the Big 12 level. That's already something that I like. But Carroll had a couple of interceptions, and I want players who make plays on the ball. Ball production is important to me. Now, at Illinois State, you did have ball production from Teon Parks. So it goes back and forth. The biggest question is, how do you make the jump from G5, D2, FCS, right? Whatever it is, G5 in these cases, how do you make the jump from G5 to Power 4? Because it is a difference, and everybody doesn't make that jump seamlessly. Talent is everywhere. There are great players on the FCS level who are not going to leave their program. Unfortunately, people are penalized for that, but this is not my moment to hop on my soapbox and tell you how I think NFL draft scouting has become very lazy in forcing players to go to bigger schools. The NFL draft is I said that this is not my time. The NFL draft is fueling the transfer portal chaos as much as college and NILs are. I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. Now, that being said, I think that these guys being inverse of each other, but both having their best times at G5s, I still want to see how do you play at TCU. I still want to see at the P4, can you shine like that? Can you make plays on the ball? Can you have pass deflections? Can you have interceptions? You know, like I said, I just saw that from Carroll at Central Michigan. I saw that before Parks got to Colorado. You want to see it at the P4 level. One guy was young, maybe just had to get some time to get some reps. The other guy, I thought he was solid. He was competent. You know, so it'll be interesting. Two players with starting experience, and we'll see where this one goes. Tomorrow, we'll be back with it. Sarah Smith will be talking about the biggest hole on the team. What is the biggest hole the TCU football team needs to fill? Sarah and I will go back and forth on this one tomorrow. Can't wait for it. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.